In this video, we will explore the evolution of 4 smartphones, the A13, A14, A15, and A16. We'll examine the upgrades Samsung has made to its most affordable entry-level phones over the years. By the end of this video, we'll answer an important question. Are Samsung entry-level phones truly improving? Let's begin. Starting with the size and weight, the A13 has a pretty standard size, nothing unusual there. But the A14, that thing is huge, it feels like a brick in your hand. The A15 on the other hand got smaller, which is a nice improvement. And then there's the A16, which even though it's about the same size as the A13, has a much slimmer profile, making it super comfortable to hold. Since I personally prefer smaller phones, I'm giving the A15 first place, the A16 second, the A13 third place, and of course the brick, the A14 gets the last place. Now, when it comes to weight, there's barely any difference. The A13 is just 5 grams lighter, so it's really not a big deal. Moving on to build quality, all 4 phones have a glass front, a plastic frame, and a plastic back. Nothing too fancy. But if we're talking about premium looks, the A16 is the clear winner. Even though its frame is still plastic, it has a metallic finish that makes it look much more high-end. Plus, the back doesn't pick up fingerprints as easily. One major improvement with the A16 is that it's the only phone here with an IP54 rating, meaning that it has some protection against dust and water splashes. That's a big plus, so in terms of build quality, the A16 definitely takes first place. Now let's talk about the screens. We've got a clear evolution here. The A13 and A14 come with PLS LCD displays, while the A15 and A16 step things up with AMOLED screens. The resolution has stayed the same at Full HD+, which is perfectly fine. But what really stands out is the screen-to-body ratio. The A16 has the best one so far, coming in at 86%, while the first 3 models aren't great in that aspect. Before we pick a winner for display quality, let's check peak brightness. The A13 and A14 both max out at around 500 nits. Not bad, but nothing special. Meanwhile, the A15 and A16 can reach 800 nits, making them much easier to see in bright daylight. With all that in mind, the A16 wins this round again. It's got the best screen-to-body ratio, great brightness, and an AMOLED panel. The A15 takes second place, followed by the A13 in third, and once again, the A14 comes in last with the worst screen-to-body ratio. Now, software updates are an important factor too. The A13 and A14 only get 2 years of Android updates, which isn't great. The A15 improves on that with 4 years, but the A16 absolutely crushes it, offering 6 years of updates. That's a huge leap forward, no question about it. The A16 gets first place in this category. The A13 unfortunately lands in last place, since it originally launched with the oldest Android version, Android 12. When it comes to storage and memory, there's a clear ranking. The A13 takes last place, since its cheapest model only comes with 32GB of internal storage and 3GB of RAM. The most expensive A13 model maxes out at 128GB of internal storage with 6GB of RAM. The A14 is slightly better, starting at 64GB, so it takes second place. As for the A15 and A16, they're tied for first place because they have identical storage configurations when you're looking at the base model or the highest end version. The good news, all phones have a microSD card slot for memory expansion up to 1TB. But here's a fun fact, the A16 actually supports up to 1.5TB of external storage, which is a nice little upgrade. Now onto cameras. All 4 phones have basically the same setup, a 50MP main camera, a 5MP ultra-wide, and a 2MP macro camera. The only real difference is the A13's selfie camera, which only has 8MP compared to the 13 found on the others. As for video, they all max out at Full HD at 30 frames per second, so no real advantage here. Since I tested the cameras on the A15, I can confidently say that it performs just as well as the A16, so both of them share first place. The A14 takes second, and the A13, with its weaker selfie camera, comes in last. Before we get into hardware performance, let's talk about sound and battery. All 4 phones have a single bottom speaker, which means that sound only comes from one side. But there's one key difference. The A16 is the only phone here that doesn't have a headphone jack. And even though its loudspeaker is better than A13's, I still have to rank it second because losing the headphone jack is a downside. Battery life is pretty much the same across the board, since all 4 phones have a 5000 mAh battery. However, charging speeds are another story. The A13 and A14 only support 15W charging, which is pretty slow, while the A15 and A16 step it up with 25W fast charging. That's a nice improvement, so both the A15 and A16 share first place in this category. Finally, let's get to hardware performance. Instead of listing out processor names, I'll focus on the actual benchmark numbers. The A14 is almost 40% better than the A13, which is a solid improvement. Meanwhile, the A16 is only 2% better than the A15, so not much of a jump here. But if you compare the A16 to the A13, the difference is massive. It's nearly 130% more powerful. So yes, there's definitely been an evolution in performance over the years. So, after looking at everything, it's clear that Samsung's entry-level smartphones are improving, but not always in every area. The A16 definitely stands out as the best overall, thanks to its build quality, software support, and display. The A15 isn't far behind, while the A13 and A14 fall short in many ways. So are Samsung entry-level phones really getting better? I'd say yes, but only if you're upgrading from an older model. Keep in mind, these are Samsung's cheapest phones. The A16, for example, can't even compete with the slightly more expensive A25, a higher-tier device that offers stereo speakers, an even better display, and superior performance. But it's fair to say that these budget phones that I showed you today, for the price you're paying, get the job done. The A15 and A16 in particular are solid choices for their category. Hopefully, this video helped clarify the differences between them and showed you a clear picture of 4 years of evolution. If you found this helpful, don't forget to press that like button, and I'll see you in the next one.